Hello, good day. My name is Chanel, and my partners are Miguel Sevillano and Flor Velázquez. Today, we're going to share you about the corporate governance evolution in the world. The history of corporate governance correspondingly extends back at least to be the formation of the East India um, Company, the Hudson Bay Company, the Lerban Company, and the other major charter companies launched in the 16th and 17th centuries. Now, my partner Miguel is going to talk about the term of corporate governance. Here you go.
This year came into working in the 1970s in a single country, the United States became within 35 years. The soldiers of the divine worldwide by academics, regulators, executives, and inventors. By 1976, the year the term corporate governance first appeared in the Federal Register by occasion and Joseph 2005.
And now the next one.
Developments occurring between the mid and 1970s and the end of the 1990s. The weak point corporate governance was weak and placed in academic and regulator short hands. Corporate governance comes and the angles. The second in the decades immediately followers World War II, the USA's and amnesty why is big corporate products Pyrrhic, the internal governance of company was not high priority. Asset and outright corporate crises were expected to be college and supported and managers executives strongly influence the selection of directors, these stakeholders, the railing investors. How dominators trading registered were now for in the first instance 1995-80. They Federal Securities and Exchange Commission (SEC) froze corporate governance and these officials reformed again in the mid 1970s.
Okay, and now the next one. Uh, This one is the that in 1974 the SEC brought proceedings against three outside directors of Penn Central, which had diversified into pipelines, hotels, industrial parks, and commercial real estate, alleging that they have misrepresented the company's financial condition under the federal security law. Range of misconduct perpetrated by Penn Central executives, and then Penn Central had gone bankrupt in 1970, with many criticizing its board for its positive, and then the discovery in mid 1970s of widespread illicit payments by U.S. corporation for to foreign officials draw the SEC further into the corporate governance realm, due in part to falsification of corporate records, of which senior executives were quite often aware. According to a 1976 SEC report, Illustration of Our System of Corporate Accountability by Seligman 1982. The chairman of the New York Stock Exchange said in 1977 the greatest challenge facing US business and private enterprise generally might be the project of pervasive government supervision and control over corporate governance and management. The SEC held that the year 6 weeks worth of hearing into the shareholder participation in the corporate electoral process and the corporate governance generally. Over 300 corporations, individual public interest groups, and law firms. The SEC retreated from orchestrating major changes with key reforms, the independence of their directors, and the use of audit, nomination, and compensation committees by Solomon in 1982. All efforts. Now, the American Law Institute, ALI, a private organization composed of practicing lawyers, academics, and judges that produces scholarly work to clarify and modernize the law committee itself in principle in 1978 to undertake a project of corporate governance. The Business Roundtable likewise urged its members ALI adoption of the draft and issue a paper strongly criticizing the document. In 1980, a conference co-sponsored with the American Bar Association and the New York Stock Exchange that the senior corporate executives, academy, lawyers, and government officials attended. By the in the early 1980, debates about corporate governance reform correspondingly focused largely on the ALIS corporate governance project. In 1978, Senator Howard Mishban, chairman of the Judiciary Committee subcommittee on citizens and shareholders' rights and remedies, appoint a blue ribbon advisory committee on corporate governance composed of representatives and industry consumers, shareholders, and labor. The advisory committee agreed that the improvements in corporate governance were vital to the future of the economy system, but failed to achieve a compromise on suitable legislation. And the threat of federal corporate governance um, reform having abruptly evaded, various business leaders felt they could abandon backing restraint, elite-led change, and oppose regulatory reform outright. Um, Now the shareholders of institutional shareholders find corporate governance, the law and economics scholars of the early 1980s who critiqued the Burley and means inspired pro regularity orthodoxy maintain that the widely acknowledged tendency of shareholders to achieve active involvement in corporate governance. Even shareholder democracy advocates such as law professor Donald Schwartz concede in a 1983 paper that the most sophisticated observers assume that the shareholder participation not capable of working well because of its impracticability uh, and because of the rational indifference of shareholders to participation in corporate affairs. The federal agency resolved numerous cases with settlements, board level changes, such as the appointment of additional outside directors and the creation of Audi committee by Skinner in 1977. Now, my partner Miguel is going to talk about the next slide.
Mace point in the introduction to Congress in 1918, the provisions of shareholders pay ECT of the 1918 a book that prescribe minimum federal standards of corporate law, the establishment of the nominations committees composed solely of independent directors, shareholders, the right to nominate candidates for election to the board of directors. The ALI's corporate governance reports in academic members of the ALI writing and in videos relating the first publication of both tentative draft number 1 in 1982 in 1984. This more state structure of California was Australia when Texaco in way the California public employs retail systems like campers.
Now, now we're talking about the that in 1984, G.C. Europe, the state treasurer of California, was stretched when Texaco, in which the California Public Employees Retirement System CalPERS. In 1984, Urut and CalPERS launched the Council of Institutional Investors, an association of public pension funds, to act as lobbying group for shareholder rights. Neither Green and Seligman argue the legal model bore little relation to the practical relatability of the dysfunctional corporate autocracy, oriented around the executives resulting in irrational decisions, hurried decisions based on inadequate factual analysis by Nader Green and Seligman in 1976. Now the challenges. In 1978, the Business Roundtable and Group establishment in 1974 to represent the views of 100 80 of chief executive officers that the role and composition of directors of the large publicly-owned corporation. In 1992, following 3 years worth of debate, the SEC amended its regulation governing the solicitation of proxies to ensure institutional shareholders discussing privately 14 particular invest companies will not have to comply with requirements with the SEC to obtain advance clearance by Wilcox in 1997. Um, Corporate executives, however, were also alarmed uh, of the content of the tentative draft number 1 and feared that the Ali policy missteps could be implemented as formal legal doctrine by the court and the legislators by Bainbridge in 1993. Now my partner Flor is going to talk about the next one.
A corporate governance complex composed of a dense array of public institutions, private and academic centers has emerged dedicated to the pursuit corporate governance by Stephen and Rudick in 2000. The possibility of conflict between investors and managers has been with centers and will continue being married consensus from a business is conduct the corporate form.
By these times, however, the deliberations of the ad hoc logic received from wider view, while one large professor and observed in 1989 that in relation to problems of corporate governance, the current debate over the Alice project of now solution because it has built the overtly then 1989.
A 1990 report by an organization for economic cooperation and development OECD advisory group that provided the departure point for the OECD's issues of corporate governance principles in 1999, confirming companies that swings advice at the corporate to finance growth. This is Business Sector Advisor Group on Corporate Governance 1998.
Thank you. Okay, and now, um, but during the early 90s, institutional investors additionally began to pressure companies to overhaul existing executives' pay arrangements to replace traditional blast towards pay for size in labor of pay for performance by Dobbin and Son in 2005. During the 19th, institutional shareholders typically spend only trivial amounts of their governance efforts, routinely declare having the availability to resolve beneficial company specific policy debates and did not seek representation of the corporate boards. By the early 1990s, corporate 70 governance was even being criticized, characterized as a rapidly evolving social science, and the growing shareholder orientation of corporate governance helps to explain the transition. Now,
developers, and other major public pension funds also began urging boards to remove underperforming executives, and between 1991 and 1993, boards of prominent companies such Westinghouse, American Express, IBM, Kodak, and General Motors complete law and economics scholars corresponding to criticize the initial early corporate governance proposal on the basis the early reports and ignored the present market forces exert on those running public companies to establish governances to artists in these holders' value. By the early 1990s, the situation was changing, and by 2003, there have been an explosion of research on corporation governance around corporate governance controversy occurring mid-1990s, and companies such as German shipbuilder Bremer Buchan, German Metals and Mining Group, Metal Gosselin, the Spanish bank Banesto, French conglomerates Navigation Mix and Suez, and the Italian conglomerate Ferrucci prone for reform. For the foreseeable future, then debate concerning the interrelationship between the dictators, executives, and shareholders others of publicly traded companies seem destined to be conducted through the concept principles of corporate governance. By the late 1980s, however, governance was becoming part of economics action, a trend reflected by Jensen and Gerald Warner using the term multiple times in a journal of financial economics. In 1987, conference entitled The Distribution of Power Among Corporate Managers and Directors, Corporate Governance, Goshen International, 1970 and 1980s, analysis of corporate focus very much excessively on generated stage corporation.
Okay. For the foreseeable future, then the debates concerning the interrelationships between directors, executives, and shareholders of publicity traded companies seem this time to be conducted through the conceptual principles of corporate governance. Thank you so much for hearing our presentation and have a wonderful day. Thank you. Goodbye.